Good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, March 4th. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Kim Mo-gyan. Before we get started, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. South Korea confirms 424 new COVID-19 cases Thursday. Meanwhile, vaccinations continue across the nation with inoculation using AstraZeneca vaccines for medical staff working in general hospitals officially kicking off today. South Korea's central bank says the nation's economy grew slightly faster than expected in the fourth quarter of 2020, although this has no effect on the overall economic contraction amid the pandemic. And at least 38 people were killed on Wednesday in Myanmar, marking the bloodiest day since protests against the military coup began last month. We begin with the COVID-19 situation here in South Korea. The country reported 424 new cases on Thursday, continuing to linger above the 400 mark. Of the new cases, 401 were locally transmitted and 23 were from overseas. There were 7 more deaths, raising the death toll to 1,619. South Korea's total number of cases has now surpassed the 91,000 mark. Meanwhile, health authorities have reported that as of midnight Thursday, a total of 154,421 people have received their first dose of the vaccine. Vaccinations using AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine has begun for the medical staff and major general hospitals, starting with Seoul National University Hospital. While vaccinations for medical staff were initially scheduled to start next Monday, some hospitals have decided to begin earlier as vaccines arrived earlier than expected. Medical staff treating COVID-19 patients, however, in these hospitals will receive the Pfizer vaccine. Health officials here in South Korea are probing 2 post-vaccine death cases. The KDCA seeks to find out if they are linked to the inoculation. Our Lee Kyung-eun has the story.
On Wednesday, 2 patients at nursing hospitals died after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine. The first patient, a man in his 50s, got the shot on Tuesday at a nursing hospital in Goyang, Gyeonggi-do Province. 11 hours later, he began to experience chest pains and breathing difficulties. The symptoms briefly improved with emergency care, only to return the next morning when he passed away. The 63-year-old man was vaccinated on Saturday in Pyeongtaek, also in Gyeonggi-do Province. He began to develop a fever and body pain 33 hours later, which repeated on and off before he died on Wednesday. Both recipients had underlying conditions, but it is not yet clear if their deaths are directly linked to the vaccines.
The cases are currently under investigation. We plan to find out if there's a direct correlation with the vaccinations by looking into their medical records and a study carried out by the Vaccination Task Force.
The authorities will also be looking into whether there were any problems with the vaccine itself or the inoculation procedure. In the meantime, they will also investigate any examples of allergic reactions known as anaphylaxis. 3 suspected cases have been reported so far among the 209 total cases of side effects. While these cases are likely to spark concerns over vaccinating those with pre-existing conditions, the government still believes people in this first priority group should get their shots.
Patients with chronic diseases require vaccinations since they're in the high-risk group. Clinical data shows the vaccine's safety and efficacy on those people have been pretty much same as with others.
However, the government is advising medical staff to take extra caution when inoculating people with underlying conditions and even to reject giving the shots when necessary. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
The rapid spread of the new COVID-19 variants is posing a grave threat to many countries as they become the dominant strain in places like Switzerland and Italy. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more on the latest developments.
It looks like the spread of a mutated COVID-19 variant is on the rise in Switzerland, with nearly 70% of the country's new cases being the new variant. Its health authorities noted Wednesday that Switzerland has witnessed a continued decline in new COVID-19 cases and fatalities, but expressed concerns over the new variant becoming the dominant strain. This comes as authorities gave the go-ahead to what they called a, quote, cautious reopening of public facilities, including shops and libraries, following a 6-week shutdown. Italy is also grappling with a rapid surge of the more transmissible UK variant, which prompted Italy's prime minister to issue an order to close all schools within areas with high risks of viral transmission. The measure comes as Italian health authorities found the UK variant accounted for some 54% of infections as of mid-February. The authorities also stressed that the figure would be much higher now. German leaders are also mulling over extending strict antivirus restrictions until later this month to further contain the spread. Despite calls for the country to ease the long-running lockdown, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said COVID-19 variants account for nearly half of new infections, which doubled during the past 2 weeks. Against this backdrop, research shows that the Brazilian variant can affect up to 61% of people who have already been infected with COVID-19. A joint research team from the UK and Brazil also found the Brazilian variant might be 2.2 times more transmissible than the original. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
The South Korean economy in 2020 contracted for the first time since the aftermath of the Asian financial crisis more than 2 decades ago. According to the Bank of Korea on Thursday, the country's real GDP in 2020 contracted by 1% on year, unchanged from the January estimate. This is the lowest figure since 1998, when it posted a negative growth of 5.1%. There are signs of improvement, though, as the country's economy in the fourth quarter of 2020 grew by an estimated 1.2% compared to the previous quarter. The central bank said this was largely due to exports increasing by 5.4% on quarter, led by semiconductors and chemical products. South Korea's consumer prices in February saw the biggest jump in a year due to a sharp increase in the prices of agricultural, livestock, and fisheries products. According to Statistics Korea on Thursday, the consumer price index stood at 107 last month, up 1.1% on year. The inflation was largely driven by agricultural, livestock, and fisheries product prices, which increased by 16.2%, the sharpest increase in 10 years. Of these, agricultural product prices rose more than 21% due to a poor harvest and rising demand during the New Year's holiday. A Korean survivor of Japan's wartime sex slavery met with Seoul's top diplomat and urged the government to take the issue to an international court. The foreign ministry appears to be taking a cautious approach to the suggestion. Here's our Yoon Jung-min with the details.
One of the surviving Korean victims of Japan's system of wartime sexual slavery, Lee Yong-soo, has once again urged the South Korean government to bring the so-called comfort women issue to the International Court of Justice. She met on Wednesday with South Korean Foreign Minister Jong-un, telling him she wants to discuss the issue personally with President Moon Jae-in.
I asked the minister to let me meet the president so I can ask him to persuade Prime Minister Suga to resolve the issue at the International Court of Justice. It is very urgent for me. I don't have much time left. I'm desperate.
The foreign minister said that he would do his utmost and will review the suggestion carefully, reportedly because it is not a simple issue. Criticizing the 2015 deal between Seoul and Tokyo, the 92-year-old Lee said what she wants from Japan is not compensation but a sincere apology. Experts, however, see it as unlikely that Japan will respond.
If the South Korean government proposes a constructive idea but Japan refuses, the US and the UN will think it is evading human rights issue.
Seoul-Tokyo relations are at a low ebb over the historical issues of Japan's comfort women system and its use of forced labor during World War II. Seoul's foreign ministry has urged Tokyo to engage in dialogue, but Japan is yet to respond. And since the South Korean foreign minister took office last month, he has not yet spoken with his Japanese counterpart. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Presiding over the regime's first ever seminar for local executives from different cities and provinces, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has demanded their utmost effort to improve their local economies and people's lives. The North state-run news agency reported Thursday that Kim pointed out that local secretaries are the core of the ruling Workers' Party, adding that they are tasked with looking after ordinary citizens. Watchers note that Wednesday's session for relatively low officials shows Kim's intention to boost economic development and solidify internal stability by highlighting their roles in his new 5-year economic development plan. Elsewhere, at least 38 people were killed on Wednesday in Myanmar, marking the bloodiest day since protests against the military coup began last month. The protesters were killed as security forces opened fire on large crowds in a number of cities. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
Describing Wednesday as the bloodiest day since the military coup began, the UN's envoy to Myanmar said at least 38 protesters were killed in the country.
Today, it was the bloodiest day since the coup happened on the 1st of February. We had only today, 38 people died. We have now more than over 50 people died since the coup started, and many are wounded.
Despite growing international condemnation, the military is continuing to escalate its response to the protests. According to Reuters, security forces opened fire in several towns and cities with little warning. At least 2 of Wednesday's victims were said to have been teenagers. Videos also showed security forces firing slingshots at protesters and even brutally beating an ambulance crew. Police have also fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the crowds. Over 1,000 protesters are also known to have been detained, and their whereabouts remain unknown.
Altogether, we have around 1,200 people are now detained, and many families don't know where their members of the families are detained, if they are healthy or not. So how can we watch this situation longer?
While the military's escalation has led to increased diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis, so far countries have only imposed sanctions on military officials. However, watchers say Wednesday's events could trigger a turning point in the dynamic. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Russia has vowed to retaliate against the West after the United States and the EU imposed sanctions in response to the poisoning and imprisonment of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Russia's foreign ministry on late Tuesday warned the U.S. not to play with fire and promised a reciprocal response to its, quote, hostile act. Moscow also slammed Washington for the counterproductive act for further worsening bilateral ties. The U.S. on Tuesday sanctioned 7 senior Russian government officials as well as 14 entities associated with Russia's biological and chemical agent production. Russia's EU envoy also vowed to respond to EU sanctions on 4 Russian officials. This week, the film Minari by Korean-American director Lee Isaac-chung won this year's Golden Globe Award for Best Motion Picture in a Foreign Language. And on Wednesday, it's finally hit South Korean theaters, drawing the biggest audiences seen in quite a while. Our arts and culture correspondent Kim Bo-kyung was there.
South Korea's movie theaters have had a tough year in the pandemic, fewer films released and limits on their operations. But for a day, it almost seemed like things were back to normal.
Movie lovers were flocking to the theaters from as early as 9 a.m., eager to watch Korean-American director Lee Isaac-chung's globally acclaimed film Minari, which finally hit the domestic screens on Wednesday.
According to the Korean Film Council, as of Wednesday afternoon, Minari accounted for more than 30% of the day's ticket sales. Those first audiences said they could see why the movie got so much recognition and that it reminded them of their own families.
The whole time I thought of my uncle. He immigrated to the US at a similar time as the Lee family, in the 80s, and he also has 2 children, a daughter and a son. He wasn't a farmer, but he told me a lot about his struggle to build a new life. I was in the US too for more than a year, so I thought about the Korean Americans I met there.
It's the first time I've been to the movies in a long time, and I was happy to see such a touching movie. The last scene was so memorable when the actress Yoon Hyo-jung was gazing at the whole family. Seeing the family reach the verge of breaking apart, but eventually getting through it, reminded me of the importance of family.
The film Minari has so far won 77 awards and 157 nominations from renowned film festivals and critics associations, including the Golden Globes. It tells the story of the Lee family, fictional Korean-American immigrants who settled in Arkansas, how they struggled to achieve the American dream. It stars Steven Yeun, Han Ye-ri, and veteran actress Yoon Yo-jung. Lee Isaac Chung's semi-autobiographical tale will appeal, as the director put it in his Golden Globes acceptance speech, to those who want to learn the language of the heart. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Good morning. It's a rainy day for southern regions. It has already started to rain from Jeju and will spread to the rest of southern parts of the country as the day goes on today. And the further south you are, the heavier rainfall you're going to see. There's up to 80 millimeters of rain in store for Jeju, while the wet weather could linger into tomorrow. The rain, though, will not affect the temperatures. Readings will actually be a few notches higher today, with wide gaps in the readings across the country, with highs hovering in the low teens across much of the country. So let's take a closer look. Gwangju will make it to 10 degrees Celsius, while Chuncheon, Daegu, Daejeon will all make it to 11 degrees. Central western regions, meanwhile, could have high levels of fine dust, while those of us further north will be under lots of clouds with glimpses of sunshine. Wide temperature swings will continue, while the capital will stay under mostly to partly sunny skies through early next week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
That will do it for us at the hour on Arirang News. We'll be back with more of the day's headlines at noon Korea time, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching.